everybody, Josh Rappaport here with Now I Get It Math. Today I'd like to present the first in a series of videos on common algebraic mistakes. I'm presenting this series because in my work tutoring, I see students making the same mistakes over and over again, as I'm sure you who are teachers probably see as well. And I'm presenting these both for students and teachers. For students, it's to help you avoid making these mistakes, and for teachers, it's to help you get to the bottom of the mistakes so students will stop making them when they're in your classroom. Okay, the first mistake we're going to look at is this one right here. Negative of 1 squared equals negative 1 quantity squared. All right, so first point I want to make is that when we are helping students with mistakes like these, it's so important to have a little empathy. And with this mistake in particular, it's actually easy to have empathy for students who make this mistake because it's so understandable to see how students might think that these quantities are equal. They look so similar, the only difference being that the term on the right has the parentheses and the term on the left does not. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Students don't make these mistakes on purpose. They make them because they've got some kind of underlying concept that's giving them some trouble. And that's actually what we're going to talk about next. What are the underlying concepts that lead to students making the mistakes, and what underlying concepts do they need to have so they don't make the mistakes? Now, the term on the right is the one that most students do get correct, but let's still look at what students need to know to get it right. The main idea here is that when you've got parentheses, it contains the terms inside the parentheses. So what you do is you say that the terms inside, the whole thing becomes a quantity, and the terms inside are in a sense fused together. And what that means mathematically, the actual effect of that is that whatever's done to one term inside parentheses, the same operation is done to every term inside parentheses. And that means that right here, when you've got negative 1 being squared, the whole parentheses is being squared, not only is the 1 being squared, but the negative sign or minus sign is also being squared. So that's the first point here. The entire negative 1 is what gets squared. And in the same way that when x gets squared, it means x times x, negative 1 being squared means that negative 1 is multiplying negative 1. And when you've got a negative multiplying a negative, of course, we get a positive. 1 times 1 is 1. So the answer here is simply positive 1. As I said, that's the part that most students get right. Okay, so that's not too hard to figure out. The part that is trickier is the other side, the left side, negative of 1 squared. Now, the underlying concept here is that in this case, in this situation, the negative sign, because we have no parentheses, the negative sign here is not contained. Nothing is containing it. So I like to say the negative sign is loose. Okay? And when the negative sign is loose, we have to interpret it in a special way. What we do is we interpret that negative sign as negative 1 times whatever follows the negative sign. Here's a nice example that shows how that works. If you've got the negative of 2 cubed, first of all, I often have students rewrite that negative sign in a different color just to highlight it for a moment. So we've got this negative sign going to an orange negative sign. Nothing else is different there. But then in the next step, we rewrite that orange negative sign as negative 1 times the 2 cubed. Then at that point, we simply simplify the 2 cubed because we do exponents before multiplication, and 2 cubed is 8. Now we're on familiar ground. We've got a negative times a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative, and 1 times 8 is 8. So we come out with negative 8. Okay? And if we follow the same logic of that, then we see that when you've got negative of 1 squared, as we had in the original expression here, the original equation, what we get is that the negative sign turns to an orange. Then that becomes negative 1 times the 1 squared. 1 squared is just 1. We have negative 1 times a positive 1. Negative times a positive is a negative. So we wind up with negative 1. And so the net effect of all this is that the right side of this is in fact positive 1, but the left side is in fact negative 1. So these two terms in fact are not equal. that was the mistake that students made up at the beginning, to think that they are actually equal when in fact they are not. So I hope this helps students understand how to interpret the two sides, the two terms here, and hopefully help students get to the bottom, to the root cause of the problem. And we'll explore other common mistakes as well. And I'm actually going to put up a few examples of problems like this so that you can all practice this concept just a little bit right afterwards as well. And feel free to subscribe to this channel if you like the kind of presentations I make, and feel free to leave comments down below. I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.